gang. So we've been reading Paradise Lost in Freedom, our 3,000 level course. And we've been debating whether or not, Satan is the hero of this poem. Not so much. That's not so much. That's the consensus, right? If we're good readers, we can see through Satan's trickery. He's maybe relatable, but that says more about us maybe than it does about, God's justice. But I just wanted to talk about this simile at the end of book 4. It's called the Ploughman Simile. And the reason I bring it up is because a lot hinges on this simile. Because it seems when you read Paradise Lost, it's fairly clear, I think, that Satan's a bad guy. It's less clear that God's a good guy. Or at least it's, I have questions. So this simile comes right at the end of book 4. And Satan has just been caught whispering in Eve's ear, right? He's putting this dream in her head while she sleeps. And so the angels guarding paradise discover him. Here's a question. Why does paradise have guards? Satan's coming. You're going to let him in. Why the pretense of guarding the place? But anyway, they catch Satan in the act, right? And they confront him. And the angels say, "Who are you?" And Satan says, "Know ye not me?" And the angels have this great reply. "Think not, revolted spirit, thy shape the same." And then Milton tells us this is beautiful. I'm just going to read you chunks of Milton now because it's awesome. But he says, "So spake the cherub, and his grave rebuke severe in youthful beauty added grace invincible. Abashed the devil stood and felt how awful goodness is." Satan and the angels, they get into this argument where Satan sort of represents himself as a freedom fighter. And, Gabriel and the angels say, yeah, that's bull. Not for nothing. Milton might give us in Paradise Lost this pattern, this model, something recognizable of the person who represents themselves as a freedom fighter or the people's champion. This person who represents themselves as a liberator, but actually isn't. That's like a common thing we still see in the world and ought to watch out for. So anyway, Satan's kind of spoiling for a fight, and then we get the Ploughman Simile. I'm just going to throw this up here for you. "While thus he spake, the angelic squadron bright turned fiery red, sharpening in mooned horns their phalanx, and began to hem him round with ported spears, as thick as when a field of Ceres, ripe for harvest, waving bends her bearded grove of ears, which way the wind sways them. The careful ploughman, doubting, stands, lest on the threshing floor his hopeful sheaves prove chaff." Okay, so this simile is a problem. So the image is that the angels' spears, their phalanx, they're like a field of wheat, right? The problem is this plowman, because he owns the field and he doubts. He worries that the spears might not stand up to the wind. Because the problem is, if the plowman owns the fields and the angels are like the fields, then the one who owns the angels is God. So is God here the doubting plowman? Could Satan actually win this fight? Because God ought to know, right? God ought to know. And if he knows, why would he be doubting? So the simile either introduces a question about God's omniscience, or it's just kind of a problematic simile. Maybe it's just that. Then things get weirder, because then we get God's scales. And, we've seen the scales, right? Zeus has scales, but it kind of seems like this God shouldn't have scales. He's in control of things in a way that Zeus maybe isn't. But okay, so God brings out the scales, and then something fishy. In these, he put 2 weights, the sequel each of parting and of fight. And then Gabriel, the angel, says in response, "Hey, Satan, check out the scales." He says, "I know thy strength, and thou knowest mine." And Gabriel says, "Read thy lot in yon celestial scales, where thou art weighed." The scales don't seem to weigh Gabriel and Satan. They're weighing fighting or parting. Here's the thing with Paradise Lost that I'm always running up against. It's almost like, like God couldn't afford a good defense attorney or something. like often these moments that should be like layups, like this should be an easy defense. He's often introducing questions and curiosities and problems in these moments when things should be pretty clear. Why don't the scales just weigh Satan and Gabriel? why does Gabriel say they do when they don't? Why does this plowman doubt? If God is beyond reproach, why are there so many questions? Or maybe all these doubts and questions that I have as a reader, maybe that you have as a reader, maybe they're just a sign of our fallenness. Take care of yourselves.